HR issues can kill you. One complaint against your company can turn your world upside down. And you spend way too much time dealing with HR when you should be spending your time on making a profit. You should talk to Bambi. With Bambi, get access to your own dedicated US-based HR manager starting at just $99 per month. They get to know you and your business while providing HR expertise and the personal touch you need and want. They're available by phone, email, and real-time chat, so onboarding and terminations run smoothly. Team members reach peak performance, and your business stays compliant with changing HR regulations. And with Bambi's HR Autopilot, you'll automate important HR practices like setting policies, training, and feedback. HR managers can easily cost $80,000 a year, but Bambi starts at $99 per month. Schedule your free conversation today to see how much Bambi can take off your plate. Go to Bambi.com right now and type in Accelerate under podcast when you sign up. It'll really help the show. Spelled BAM, BEE.com. Bambi.com. Type in Accelerate. Welcome to Accelerate Your Business Growth, where we're exploring all sorts of business topics. Experts from around the world join me, your host, Diane Helbig, for a conversation where they share their expertise with all of you. Take what you need when you need it. Featured on Inc.com, Forbes, and MSNBC's Your Business, this podcast is recognized as one of the best podcasts for small business, sales, leadership, social media, and more. When it comes to business, Accelerate Your Business Growth has got it covered. And now on with the show. My guest today is Jack Flaherty. Jack is on a mission to advocate for and educate today's leaders on how to make confident, agile, and effective decisions. Throughout a career working with executives at the highest level, Jack has observed patterns about how good decisions are made and not. He's developed a system for making better decisions he calls the decision switch. Thanks so much for joining me today, Jack.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So, decision making. I find personally that a lot of leaders struggle with effective decision making, like they're afraid to make a wrong decision or whatever it is. But why is it, what do you say, one of the most critical components of our executive skill set in really determining whether we're going to be successful or not?
It's really simple. Our decisions correlate directly with our success, both personal as well as our quality of life. And without that, that correlation, it really wouldn't, rise to the prominence that it has. But by seeing, the impact of our decisions and the success that comes out of that, and knowing how to, work with others to achieve our goals, generally leads to better outcomes.
Okay. And what are you seeing? Do you think decision making is easier or more difficult today than it was, say, 10 years ago?
Great question. This is something that I actually did a tremendous amount of research about, in that, part of my thesis is that decision-making is not a skill set many of us were ever taught. It's assumed that everyone has a good toolbox, for better words. And, so laying that as the foundation, that you don't really have a great framework in place, with all the new technologies that are constantly bombarding us with information and demanding us to make decisions in real time, forces us to shortcut a lot of the, necessary steps that we should take, to make, great decisions and achieve the outcomes that we truly deserve and, we should achieve.
Really? Okay. So let's talk about automation and how we're all this interconnected world and how we collaborate and make decisions. What really has been the impact of that? Has it, the reason I'm asking is like off the top of my head, I would say, well, it should make it quicker and easier and more efficient. But then I stop and I wonder, is that really what's happening here? What is really happening here?
Sure. I love this because I actually take it through a timeline. So going back, 10 years, really was the advent of real-time communication. And, now we've evolved into Slack and, Telegram and all these different, messaging services. Yeah. So in real time, we can communicate, which I think is a tremendous, innovation for collaboration. The challenge, though, is it's all unstructured text. And so unless you're constantly paying attention to that dialogue, you might miss a critical point, a question, or even somebody, giving you an approval.
Oh.
And, as a result, I find myself, in various situations where I'd have to drop everything, scan through hundreds of lines of text just to be able to substantiate, why I'm making a recommendation or a decision.
Yeah.
And now we're moving into the new world of automation where the systems themselves are performing many of the tasks that individuals used to do. And so when the human or the individual used to do it, they would have the intimate knowledge for how the calculation was performed, what assumptions were included. And now we're basing that on how that automation was designed. And taking it one step further, with the remote workforce and our reliance on these technologies, we no longer have those structured relationships where we can, open ourselves up and have intimate conversations about our fears, our challenges, our needs. And as an example, I can remember often early on in my career where I had come off a challenging call, I'd have a difficult decision to make, go into a partner's office or an executive's office and just dump all the information on the table. And I had somebody who had the experience in going through that to sift through all that information. And we pick out, what the kernels are that were truly important. And that helped us define that path to take the next step forward. So without that structure, even though these technologies are great innovations, I think we're still on that evolutionary curve. And we will ultimately get to a point where it does truly, be an accretive asset to the decision-making process, but we're still working through that. And I think that's where we as leaders need to rethink, how we're engaging our teams and our organizations to make sure they have the necessary support, given, again, the influx of new, information, the speed of that we need to act in business, and the amount of decisions we need to make.
I think that is such a huge point. It is. There's real value in being able to have a remote team, but you have to make sure that you are still engaging that team in a way that keeps the engine moving, really, in the company in a way that isn't hamstrung. So and I get it that we're figuring our way through that. So all right. So let me ask a question. So you suggest a framework to use for making decisions. Can we unpack some of that, and can you explain what that decision switch is and how that works?
Absolutely.
Great.
The decision switch was built on the premise that decision making is a process and it's not an event. Frequently, we make knee-jerk decisions based on a gut feeling or a past experience, which essentially puts up tunnel vision on what we're doing. And when I took a step back and I looked at many, and I come from a risk management background, so a lot of my work was, for better words, identifying the issues that organizations had. And while we really attribute it to maybe a technology or lack of execution or something of the sorts, it all the root cause generally came down to a bad decision. And so I put together a framework based on, quite frankly, my own failures or my observations of my clients and working with colleagues to really direct us towards, what is the most optimal decision. And so, the first is, triage first. I did a lot of work in the medical industry, so I borrowed the term because I love the word triage. It's snappy, but it's the notion of compiling all the information about a situation and identifying, the value proposition, whether or not you have enough information, and the urgency which you need to act. And that allows you to create that path forward of maybe what individuals you need to work with, what resources you need for that, particular decision. The second principle is to follow your North Star, which it's critical in the decision-making process, because frequently I find individuals, they'll look at their own priorities and not an organization's mission statement or their objectives or their goals. And so it's critical that we remind folks what the mission statement is, what are our goals, so that everyone is all focused on those particular objectives, and we all make decisions, targeted towards that. The third principle is to collaborate with others. And this serves to create the most well-rounded conclusions we can make, because if we're only talking to individuals that, we know agree with our position, our decision, it really supports or cultivates that confirmation bias. And by collaborating with others, and even those that vehemently oppose our ideas, helps to identify weak points and puts real strength in the conclusions we make, and ensures that it's supported and we can achieve our outcomes. The fourth principle is to recognize cognitive bias. So often have I seen at board meetings or executive meetings where you can see an individual making a decision or a position based on their views of an individual, a situation, or an opportunity. And if we can strip that down, drop those walls, and allow us to make objective questions, not in a deconstructive manner, but in a creative manner. I have, a number of individuals just looking at a painting and saying, how can we make this better? Not, why is this bad? The fifth principle is to establish a champion. Going back to the notion that it's a process and not an event. So many projects, so many decisions fail because they lose momentum. They lose their focus. And quite frankly, stakeholders, don't hold up, to their commitments. And so having that executive champion to help push that forward is critical in accomplishing our goals. The sixth principle I really want to emphasize, because empathy is a big component of my book and my platform. As we're making decisions, very frequently, there's negative implications. We might be making the most optimal decision, but if there's a negative implication, instead of breaking down that bridge, we can build stronger bridges by looking on behalf of that individual, that organization, and seeing where there's additional opportunities. How can we help them so that they have a soft landing, or even land at a higher place? And that really strengthens those relationships. And that's principle 6, managing fallout. And principle 7 is practice self-reflection. Frequently, I see executives and individuals make the same mistakes over and over and over. And that's because they don't take a step back and say, why did I fail, or why did this not go through, and see where the error was, and be able to reshape their approach, their process, their thinking, so that the next time they are presented with the same decision or situation, they can come to a better conclusion. And it really empowers personal growth.
I think this is so great, and I'm really glad that empathy is part of this, in just the biggest way, because empathy, I mean, you're exactly right. There's the potential there's going to be fallout, and it makes the situation worse when you aren't mindful of that, when you aren't aware of that, and you don't address it. It makes it worse for everybody, including the people where there isn't fallout, because they're all connected to each other and in this community and in this environment. And so it really hits everyone, no matter how they survive, I guess I'll say, whatever the decision is.
Yeah, I'll just add on real quickly. I think it's super critical, even from a selfish perspective, empathy, because it directly correlates to our legacy, to our relationship, and our able to build our business. Because when people see the decisions that we make, and they may be on the negative side of it, but they see the positive actions that we take, it creates an aura around you. And I learned this from my father, who only graduated from high school with a diploma and retired very successfully. The reason why he was so successful is people could trust his decisions, the feedback he gave them, because when he told them no, or you shouldn't do that, he provided the background, the support of why. And I think by providing that clarity really alleviates a lot of that anxiety that we have when we're on the downside of a decision.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It really makes such a difference, and it's not a difficult thing. It's just really being aware of it, I guess, really being on top of it and realizing that it's part of the process. So
absolutely.
Yeah. Now, you said something else that I thought was so interesting that sort of struck me. And it was a lot of times people are focused on their own individual goals, and they're not looking at their North Star, or the organization's North Star in their decision making. That really struck me because I see that a lot in companies where what I always say is, as long as it's serving the business, it'll serve everyone else. But if it's not serving the business, it's going to serve no one. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we have to be careful about moving the goalpost to something else that's more of a personal goal than the goals of the business.
Absolutely. And I'll just use a quick example.
Sure.
You think about year-end, whether it be compensation process or budgeting process, and I've been given a goal and I'm going to be compensated by it. And so, of course, my focus is on my compensation.
Right.
If you establish and cultivate a culture that, acknowledges the sacrifices that you made for the greater good, then you're, in a sense, rewarded for making the best decision available. And, that gets included within your performance evaluation or, whatever aspect of the process. The same goes for the budgeting process. If you're going to forego some of, your capital for this year, acknowledgement by executive management or your colleagues and saying, I really appreciate that you did that for me.
Right.
It really builds collaboration and amongst executives. Far too often, I see disagreement and argument because we have these fiefdoms, these silos, and those can actually be deconstructive to organizations, even though selfishly for myself, I'm going to get paid more this year because I hit my goal.
But isn't that short-lived? I mean, you may do better this year, but that isn't really sustainable, is it?
Depends on what position you are.
No.
What's the average lifespan of a CEO these days? 2 years? What's the you look at a lot of these positions, the lifespan is not that long.
Yeah.
But if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a CEO, if you have a truly vested interest, you've got that long-term goalpost in mind. And again, going back to cultivating a great culture of collaboration. I'm working in the worlds of derivatives trading. I share stories about where I'd sit toe to toe with someone who's very senior to me, and almost to the point of yelling because we're trying to figure out what the right outcome was. In that scenario, we all wanted the best, and I'd say 99% of the time we did come to the best conclusion. And despite having those contentious discussions, we go out for drinks or dinner afterwards, and it's as though nothing happened that day. So you don't take it personal, because far too often we take decisions personally because we didn't, quote unquote, win.
Right. Yeah, it's terrible, isn't it? So if there's an entrepreneur listening to this, which there is, I know for a fact there are. But they're listening to this and they're saying, okay, this makes sense to me. Can you tell us, what is step one in, say, a concentrated effort to improve our decision-making going forward?
The first step is really uncracking the shell of an organization. And there's got to be an advocate, a prophet that talks about and really pushes it out to the organization and says that it's okay to have disagreements. It's okay, and to ask objective questions. And a great tool to do that is set the expectation that going into meetings, you're expected to participate. If you're not talking, if you're not asking great questions, then you don't need to be here. And it makes sure that individuals are armed with good questions. And again, not deconstructive questions, but how do we build this a little better? How do we make sure that we're, our armor is that much stronger, or, whatever machine we're building is that much more efficient? And I think that is really where the roots of this grow, is looking at, a decision or a situation or whatever and saying, how can we make this better?
So I love that. I completely agree with you. And as you were saying that, I was thinking to myself, so the leader has to have a healthy enough ego to be able to ask for that sort of input and then really listen to it.
Yes. The most amazing leaders I've ever worked with were extremely confident, but self-aware enough to realize that they may not have all the answers.
Right.
Or they may have a blind spot. And so they'll propose an idea and they'll proactively, ask, poke holes in this, see where the faults are, where might be, where could we stumble on this? And that is so critical, to being open to the idea that, we may not have all the answers, or we may have a subjective bias that's placing a lens on how we view something. And by, again, a good discourse and having a great conversation, throwing out ideas, both sides can become more informed about why this suggestion was made, but also why, there may be some faults in that. And, when you celebrate the wins where you achieve something, you did something great, it really, manifests in a great culture where, folks want to help that organization really shoot for the stars.
Well, yeah, because they feel like they're part of that success, like they've really contributed to creating that plan and that strategy that gets the organization, they have more buy-in, gets the organization where it wants to go. So
yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I always say the leader's job is not to have all the answers. It's to convene the resources to find the answers, like, to have that conversation, right? So, because I know so many small business owners, they think they are supposed to have all the answers. And that's part of what keeps them up at night and drives them crazy, because they don't. And they think they should. And it's just crazy making.
Well, it's that, and we'll come to it, shortly. But it's that overconfidence, that autocratic leader, that I know what is right.
Right.
And so, you need to follow my direction, and we'll reach the top of Mount Everest, versus saying there's a storm coming in, possible avalanches, and yet we're still climbing to base camp 1.
Right. Yeah. Believe me, I am totally with you. So, Jack, I really appreciate this information and breaking it down. I every single point made so much sense to me. Will you tell the listeners how they can find you, how they can find your book, what you've got going on, please?
Absolutely. I mean, this is a subject that I left my last career because I think this is so essential for the future, particularly with, digital disruption, wave of change. You can find me at www.thedecisionswitch.com. And my book is Decision Switch, 7 Principles of Successful Decision-Making, which is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, most of your major retailers.
Awesome. Wow. Well, thank you so much, as I said. And listeners, thank you. You are who we're doing this for. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Accelerate Your Business Growth, a production of Evergreen Podcasts. Discover more episodes of this podcast and explore others at evergreenpodcast.com. As always, continue to prosper and be curious. And if you're looking to get your sales strategy headed in the right direction, pick up a copy of Succeed Without Selling on Amazon or wherever books are sold. Until we meet again on another episode of Accelerate Your Business Growth, goodbye and good day.
Are you tired of seeing your teen or young adult struggle on a path that clearly isn't the right fit? Is your teenager confused about which direction to take after high school? The future of work is changing rapidly, and our kids need to know all of the options available after high school so they're empowered to make the choice that is best for them. In each episode, we explore the latest trends that are shaping the opportunities of today and tomorrow. I'm your host, Betsy Jewell, and this is the High School Hamster Wheel Podcast.